Raise your voices, raise your glass high. Welcome to the Drink O'Clock Podcast. Let's dive. Oh, grab an old fashioned and join the fray. Raise your spirits, let the music play. From the corner pub to the dance hall floor. Drink O'Clock Podcast, we're ready for more.
We are live. This is the Drink O'Clock Podcast. I am your busy and ever running around host, Rob Valincius, and I have the pleasure of having with me someone with an easy name this time around. And shout out to you, Anand, with your damn last name I couldn't say. I have Nicole Wilson, who's a tea writer and educator. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So, tea. When you reach out to me, I'm like, there's got to be some pretty interesting things to discuss when it comes to tea, because you see a lot of stuff, especially with the age of the internet, right? You see a lot of stuff about what it can do, what it doesn't do, all the different variations. So it's good to have you on the show. But before we get on to tea, this podcast is about you, right? So talk to me a little bit about you growing up. You talk, about milky sweet cups of black tea, right? How did that, talk about growing up, and how did that eventually evolve into your expertise and what you do now?
So I grew up in a tea drinking household. My mom still drinks more tea than I do often, but she kind of sticks to her old school tea bags that we always grew up with, and when I went away to college, was really kind of a turning point, because my classmates were drinking coffee for, morning classes or staying up writing papers. And I just didn't like coffee back then. So I started trying different kinds of teas, and I stumbled upon a website that was looking for staff tea reviewers. So basically their website said, we'll send you lots of free tea and you just write about it. And, I was dorming, free
It's a sweet job.
In college is always good. And I got this really awesome early education where they would send me packets with like 100 samples from all over the world. And I initially started my own website as a place to back up the writing I was doing for them. That website eventually shut down, but by that point, my blog had kind of taken on a life of its own. And it's been a real journey.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, look, I was very, very addicted when I was a high schooler to iced tea. What part of the country are you in?
I'm in New Jersey.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm from Philly.
Yeah, not too.
So you're familiar with Wawa, right? Yeah, well, I was addicted to Wawa iced tea to the point where I actually stained my teeth. I was drinking so much tea because I would drink it while I'm playing basketball. Like, I was obsessed with it. And then one day I was like, all right, I'm a cold turkey person. So I'm like, all right, I can't do this. This is not good for a 17-year-old, 18-year-old to be just chugging half gallons. It was delicious. Loved it. But I know, we're talking about like brewing tea. Like, can you tell me, this is for me, this is my education, like what is the difference between something like an iced tea and like the tea you would brew at home?
So typically iced tea, really you're just brewing it stronger, so that when you're cooling it down, especially with ice, you're not going to dilute the flavor. So you can totally make iced tea just like that at home. Often your like commercial iced teas might be made from like a tea powder. They're going to use like the lowest cost option if they're, needing to brew very large amounts of tea to sell, jugs to Wawa. I'm sure that's what they would do in that case.
Yeah, the not fun stuff, right? So what inspired you to start the Tea for Me blog?
Yeah, so I really just initially was backing up my tea reviews from this website that I had been writing for. And I was just really so excited about tea. I knew no one else who cared about tea as much as I did. So it was really a creative outlet of a place where I could share new things I was learning or a new gadget or gizmo I had purchased. And other people who were as interested in tea as I was could read what I was writing and could respond. So I really found like a sense of community that way, where, through tea and through my blog, I've connected with people all over the world, which is really one of my favorite parts of what I do, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the same thing with this, right? I mean, I've interviewed people from Japan, Australia. I got a couple Australians, a couple UK guys. So like, you meet people and you do things, and you just kind of never know where it's going to take you at the end of the day. And then, how did that influence you to kind of write the book?
Yeah, so I basically was approached by my publisher, and so they knew they wanted a book of tea recipes, and they were looking for someone who might have the skill set to do that. Interestingly, I'm really not so much of a recipe blogger. Like I have a few kind of scattered over the years, but it wasn't necessarily my forte. So it was a little intimidating at first, but I was like, I think I can do this, and luckily they gave me the chance to.
That's awesome. So, in terms of the book, obviously you got a lot of tradition, but then also you experimented quite a bit. How did you decide on which recipes you were going to include?
Yeah, so a lot of the recipes were really just my personal favorites. I love tea, so I drive my husband crazy incorporating it to everything. And, I find it really fun to do, just kind of, casually on my own. There were some things that my publisher really wanted included, just based on their research, things that are trending that they wanted covered. So it was kind of like a meeting of the two in a sense.
Okay. What was there any recipes that you really liked that didn't make the cut?
Um, None that didn't make the cut, I would say. They were pretty accepting on my side as long as I included the things that they wanted to have in the book. So
Makes
it
sense.
was nice to have some freedom there, yeah.
What do you think was the most challenging part of writing the book?
Definitely the most challenging part was the bubble tea chapter. I was never really that into bubble tea. It's definitely something a lot of people really like. I live near New York City and there's bubble tea shops on every corner. But it really
Now,
was.
hold on. Before you go into this, you got to. What the hell is bubble tea?
Yeah, so
Educate me here.
Yeah, so a lot of people call it boba or pearl tea.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's basically like tapioca pearls, and it'll usually be mixed into like a milky, sugary tea drink. A lot of times they don't even really contain much tea, like if you get them from the shop. But
That's not something that It just something about it freaks me out, man. I don't know, like I can't drink kombucha either. It just freaks me out. Like I'm one of those people. I need it pureed. I don't need like stuff in my drink unless it's like I'm drinking a drink that is supposed to have a lime or something in it. You know what I mean? It's different. But if it's got all this stuff, I don't know. I'm out.
yeah, I definitely feel you there. When I first started getting, recipe testing, I had a hard time because I really wasn't that into boba. But I found a way because a lot of the like instant ones that are sold to make at home really aren't very good. And I just didn't feel comfortable writing recipes based off of those. So I came up with a way to make the boba from scratch in the microwave at home. And so that was really a game changer because it really made it easy to make a very small batch of fresh boba, just enough for two drinks, to use as a centerpiece for different drinks that you can use it with. Um,
That's cool.
yeah,
That's cool.
I started out on the stovetop, set off my fire alarm, and the fire department came to my door with a hatchet. So the microwave,
That's always
the
fun.
microwave was definitely a better way to go.
They're like, would you like some tea, gentlemen? What do you think was the most rewarding part of the book? I mean, it's got to be pretty cool to have recipes that you yourself enjoy and you can kind of share that with the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, I mean, just being able to say I'm a published author is really awesome. As I've been writing for so long that's really my first, publication in that sense. But I really love just hearing from people that they found my book helped them. Tea can be really intimidating. And so I love when people tell me that my book made them feel more comfortable to just have fun and experiment and try new things. Even if they're not necessarily connoisseurs just yet, it really, I think, empowers them to be able to, give tea more than a glance that they might have given before.
Yeah, I guess to quote you, it's tea can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be,
100%.
right? How do you think you kept that balance for readers, who might be intimidated by all the like boba, like the technical aspects to it?
Yeah, so part of that is kind of my approach in general. A lot of my writing that I do for my website are just, targeted at beginners, making complicated topics really approachable. Because I find some people kind of go the other way with tea, where they get so nerdy and so idiosyncratic that it's like people are like, "Oh, that's not for me. That's too much."
Yeah.
Where I
I would be that person. I would be
yeah,
that person.
where I always try to make things a little more approachable and not so scary. And that was also part of what my publisher was looking for too. They wanted the recipes to be able to made with things you had in your pantry, tools you already have, that you didn't have to go out and buy special things to make these recipes. That's something I find anytime I pick up a cookbook. I never make any of the recipes because I look at it and I'm like, okay, I don't have this, I don't have that. This only comes in a 5-pound bag, and I just never make the recipes. Where if it's, broken down into really small portions, easy to get things you already have, it makes it a lot easier and more fun to dive in, I think.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the recipes, right? So, you got a lot of different styles, right? There's a lot of different types of tea. How important is it for you to honor like the cultural origins of some of the tea styles, right? Because you got the Southern sweet teas, the Moroccan mint tea. You have a lot of different styles. How do is it, well, obviously Southern, when you think of sweet tea, you think Southern. So I think that like certain ones just make sense, right? I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. For tea is the world's most consumed beverage, second only to water, which like water is not really a beverage in that way, I think. So to me, tea's number one. And because of that, there's so many different cultures all over the world that celebrate and enjoy tea in different ways. And so that's definitely one of my big mantras, is that there's no such thing as a right or wrong way to make tea. And it's because there really are so many different cultures who each do tea in different ways. So it was definitely super important to honor that, and really include that, because people might not be familiar with these other cultures. But for me, tea has really been a catalyst for understanding other people, because I've learned about so many different cultures through tea.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah,
That's kind of cool. And I can see that because you do have a lot of different, it's just like food, everyone has their own. We watch a lot of the Food Network, like
same.
an obscene amount of the Food Network, where we love watching Bobby Flay. And you know what? Food Network doesn't get like, I think, the clout that it should, because they have some really cool like games, like the 24 for 24. If you ever watch that, it's 24 hours, 24 chefs, and they're like, a lot of them are like well-known chefs, or they're chefs that are on the Food Network. They're good chefs. There's one, Cutthroat. I don't know if you watch that. That's awesome because they have like things where they'll like well, what's the word I'm looking for? They'll like sabotage each other. He'll sabotage, like the host will sabotage them. So it makes for like interesting. I never thought I would watch the Food Network regularly, but here we are. When you're pushing 40,
It
the Food
happens,
Network
yeah.
grows on you. So in terms of like original recipes, right? Versus classics. So you have like the Arnold Palmers, chai lattes, things like that. How did you approach those? Like, did you add your own spin on it? I didn't look at all your recipes, but like, did you have your own thing, or did you try to stick, to as close to it as possible?
Yeah, so for a lot of the recipes, they kind of are more classics, but with a tea twist. So it was almost like figuring out how to incorporate tea into different things. Definitely, especially the cocktail chapter was a really fun one for me. Was figuring out there's a lot of different ways you can incorporate tea into cocktails, and so it was fun to kind of figure out what the best way was, with each recipe. Definitely one of my favorites there is the tea sangrias. My family likes tea, but they're definitely not on my level when it comes to tea. But if I bring the tea sangrias to the barbecue, they're definitely going to enjoy it.
It's hard. It's hard not to say yes to a tea sangria, right? All right, let's talk misconceptions. All right. You can tell me as many as you want, but give me a couple common misconceptions about tea.
I would say the biggest one is people tend to think of tea as one thing. So especially like most in the U.S., most Americans, if they think tea, they think of just like a Lipton tea bag that you get given at a diner with like some tepid water. And
Yeah,
but
I'm guilty of that.
the world of tea is so much more diverse and wider than that, that I think that's definitely one of the biggest misconceptions. That we're just not like our culture is a coffee culture, and so we're not exposed necessarily to all of the wonderful things that the world of tea has for us. So I think that's definitely a huge one.
So if you were to compare like a cup of tea and a cup of coffee, what does the caffeine intake look like on, we'll just say just a standard tea, nothing fancy, and a standard cup of coffee?
Yeah, so tea technically by weight will have more caffeine than coffee, but your serving size is smaller. So typically, most tea does wind up being less than coffee, generally about half. It's hard to generalize because the amount of caffeine that's in tea is determined by a lot of different factors, and so there isn't necessarily like a single number that you can say like that's how much caffeine is in tea. So it definitely varies quite a bit. Like I know matcha is a green tea that's very very popular right now, and
Yeah.
pretty high in caffeine. Part of that is because the way it's processed, but also because you're basically eating the whole tea leaf, so you're just getting more of everything.
That doesn't sound appetite. All right, you're gonna tell me. So, what was it like going through all of these recipes, and then you get to the end result? Because I've had some. So, I was making my like I was taking old fashions, and I was making them from scratch, right? Doing the sugar cube. First one I make, spill everywhere. Just like I'm like, oh, this looks delicious, everywhere. So I have to make a second one, which was not fun, by the way. But then I make the second one, so I go through the making of two to only be able to drink one, and the one that I end up drinking just tastes like shit. You go through this whole process,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, that is just not good. So now I actually found a mix that I use that's just it. I'm one of those people. It's all about convenience for me. So, half an ounce of that, ounce of bourbon, I'm good. Or 2 ounces of bourbon, I'm good. Did you experience that as you were going through this? Like, oh, I don't like this at all.
Yeah, it was definitely kind of trial and error. During COVID, one of my husband's like hobby was kind of just making drinks at home, since you couldn't go out and enjoy them with your friends like you usually would. So part of that was I got like some really good home bartending experience before I started on the book, so that was helpful.
That's good. That is
Definitely,
good.
yeah. I definitely kind of stayed in my lane in a way when it came to that though. Like, I gin I like, vodka I like, whiskey I like, tequila not so much. So there's not really anything involving tequila in the book because I was like, I can't even taste that if I wanted to. So
we all have experiences with certain brands of
oh,
booze from when you're growing up, and I'll tell you, what is the it's a Scottish whiskey.
I like
What
Johnny
is
Walker,
not Johnny, or Irish. It was the Irish
okay.
one.
Redbreast.
Hold on,
Oh,
I'll
Jameson
tell you.
is usually good. Yeah.
Jameson. Yes, Jameson. So I have an experience when I was 23. It was my birthday. I had I drank a lot, and then my cousin showed up and gave me a shot of Jameson, and it was like that. I was teetering like this, and when he gave me the shot, it was just blacked out, threw up all over myself, and to this day, I can't drink it.
Yeah.
I can't do it. And a buddy of mine, he can't drink gin. So there's like certain things I think as a human, you just learn there's just one bad experience that just fucks it up for all the other alcohols.
Definitely.
So let's talk a little bit about tips. You offer a lot of troubleshooting tips, things like that. What are some of the top 2 or 3 mistakes that new tea brewers tend to make? Someone like me.
I would say definitely one of the bigger ones is making sure you're using enough tea. So especially, a lot of people like to use big coffee mugs that are like 16 plus ounces. But each tea bag or a teaspoon of loose leaf tea is really only enough for 8 ounces of water. So people always tell me like they don't like tea because it tastes like water. And partly I'm like, well, it's mostly water. But also, if you're only using one tea bag for like a giant cup, you're just not going to have enough flavor there. Where if you have, say, a 16-ounce cup, even just adding that one extra tea bag or an extra scoop of tea leaves, that'll help make sure that your flavor is there. That's definitely a huge one. Another one is knowing how long to brew your tea and what water temperature. Um, every tea is a little bit different, and there's not really like a hard set rule on it. But especially green tea, a lot of people tell me they don't like green tea because it's bitter. But green tea, when you brew it with boiling water, becomes very, very bitter. It basically over extracts all of the bitter compounds that are in the tea. Where if you dial that down and use a much cooler water, you'll actually have a much better tasting cup than if you use the boiling water.
Yeah, see. So, they talk a lot about green tea and its properties and the things that it can do, and I don't really understand how that's any different than, like, is there a specific difference between green tea and regular tea? Like,
Yeah,
is it
so
just the leaf
I
or
think the one important thing to understand is that all tea comes from the same plant. So it's an evergreen plant native to China called Camellia sinensis. And so whether it's green tea, black tea, oolong, they all come from the same plant. Herbal teas like mint or chamomile don't come from that plant, so technically they're not tea. So that's also a big misconception I get from a lot of people that they don't understand that there's different herbs that you can brew, but they're not necessarily tea. Um, and really, how what determines what type of tea that the leaves become is how they're processed. So on some
okay,
level, each every type of tea contains some level of all the compounds that are just naturally in the tea plant because they all come from the same thing. But green tea, because it's the least oxidized, basically, when after you pick any kind of like leaves or flowers, they'll kind of start to turn brown over time. Kind of like if you leave an apple slice out.
yeah,
And so basically, black tea is fully oxidized, where green tea, they'll apply heat to keep it in that greener state. And because it's kept in that greener state, it is higher in antioxidants, which are part of what people will drink tea for the health benefits. So green tea definitely gets a lot of the hype, I guess you would call it, when it comes to supposed health benefits because it is higher in those antioxidants technically.
interesting. Look, you're like a Heisenberg of tea over there. I'm sure you got your own like little lab. What's your setup look like for
Oh
making
yeah,
tea?
I do. So this is actually like my tea office. So it's
That's
yeah,
awesome. You could definitely have a tea party. You got a lot of teapots going on back there. I love it.
absolutely,
I
yeah.
love it. So in terms of equipment,
Mhm.
like, is there when you're making your tea, is one teapot better than another, or what's? I didn't even think about that when I was putting up my questions. I'm like, I guess in terms of your actual equipment that you need, is it expensive? Like,
So you can really go either way. So that's kind of one of the cool things about tea is you can make it as simple or as complicated as you want to. For some people, they just want tea bags, and if that's what you like, that's fine. All you need is a cup. For definitely, I would encourage anyone who's interested in tea to try loose leaf tea, just because you can really access a much more higher variety of tea and higher quality of tea. But it's not as scary as it might seem because really all you need is like a basket infuser. So a lot of companies sell they're just like simple stainless steel cylinder baskets that you can just pop into any teacup or teapot or cup you already own. And all you need to do is put the tea in, add your hot water, take it out when the tea's done brewing, and you've got your tea. So they're super inexpensive, so you don't necessarily have to spend a fortune to get started. But if you get as into tea as I am, there's definitely lots of gadgets and gizmos and, special artisan teapots that you could go down the rabbit's hole of if you wanted to.
So picture me. I'm new. Okay, I think I actually did buy like a specialty tea thing at some point. There was a lot. What was the tea store that was
Oh,
really
probably
big for a
Tivana.
while in the 2000s? Tavana. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I someone gave me a gift card to there. I don't know why. And I feel like I used it. I got something from there and had no idea what the hell I was doing. Um, can you give some new people some good tips and tricks? I know you talked about some mistakes people make, but if someone's brand new, is there anything that you could tell them to kind of guide them in the right direction?
Yeah, I would definitely say, start with what flavors you already enjoy. So sometimes I'll see, on like the tea subreddit or somewhere where, somebody buys a bunch of tea wanting to get into it, but they buy a bunch of stuff that like they don't know what is, they don't know what flavors they like. If they like something really sweet, they're buy a bunch of stuff that isn't sweet at all. And so that makes it hard for that to become something you enjoy, something that becomes part of your lifestyle. So I definitely think like starting with what tastes you like, and working from there. So, if you like floral, there's definitely lots of teas that are naturally floral. You can buy teas that have rose or lavender added to them. I think starting with a taste you already like is a good way to kind of just get your feet wet, until you're ready to really start digging deeper.
Okay, so let's just talk classic tea. You know, um, what does that look like in terms of preparation and then an end user cup, like just a standard thing? Are we talking, you know, 10 minutes? We talking a half hour? What's that look
Yeah,
like?
so I would say for most teas, you're going to brew generally about 3 to 5 minutes. It definitely varies by tea. Teas that are more delicate or might become bitter more easily, you'll brew for less time. Teas that are, or something that's herbal, like say mint or chamomile, they don't have any tea in it at all. So you can brew for longer without having them become bitter. So it really does vary a bit depending on what you're drinking, but generally 3 to 5 minutes is a good rule of thumb.
Interesting. I thought it would. For me, in my head, I'm like, oh no, tea's gonna take a lot longer.
Yeah.
Um, do they have easier? Like for instance, once again, I'm a man of ease, so I bought like a the K cup type coffee machine, so I could just pop a pot in. It does it. As long as there's water in there, I'm good. Do they have things like that for tea?
They do have K cups. Honestly, I'm not so much of a fan of those. If you enjoy them, then that's, for anyone who does like them, you do you. But I definitely, I think with tea, tea functions different than coffee when you're making it. So that's the biggest part of it, I think. For coffee, we grind it into a powder. And for most coffee preparations, you're just pouring water through it. So the water's not, unless you're doing like a fancy pour over or something like that, the water's not really spending a whole lot of time in contact with the powdered coffee once you grind it.
Yeah.
Where tea takes time to extract. And so just pouring water through, like even if it's a powdered tea, isn't necessarily going to give you the full flavor that you would normally be able to get out of tea. So I definitely, if you do need convenience, tea bags are a great way to go. There's a lot of companies that do make tea bags that have loose leaf tea inside, so you can still get a high quality tea with a convenient method of brewing.
So basically, what you're telling me is if you're doing like Lipton, if you're doing a K cup, that's like the Bud Light, Miller Light of tea making, is what you're telling me. I get made fun of all the time for drinking Miller Light and Bud Light, okay? And I got to tell you, it's because it's cheap and I can have a couple, and it's a relaxing thing. So a lot of times when I go out to a bar, it's a light beer, Michelob Ultra, and my
Mhm.
friends are like, they're getting the fancy shit. Now I will drink an old fashioned because I really do enjoy old fashions. I think there's a skill set, and I'm guessing tea sounds like it could be the same way. There's almost like a skill set involved when you're doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I almost kind of, there's a lot of parallels between tea and wine on that kind of level, I think. If you're just beginning to drink wine, you're probably doing barefoot or yellowtail or something in a box. Like, you're not necessarily drinking the creme de la creme of wine.
Yeah.
And you might stay there, and that's fine. If that's what you like and enjoy, then that's what that product exists for. But if you really get into wine, there's like levels and levels and levels above that. And so I think that's kind of like what it is for tea. Like it's wherever you want, are interested in going or feel comfortable going into. But definitely, there's many levels that, like, if you like your Lipton, that's fine. But there's definitely a lot more to explore too.
You're just gonna look down on me from above.
Oh
I
no,
get
definitely.
it. I'm kidding.
If I mean, there's some caffeine and somebody hands me Lipton, I'll drink it. It's still tea.
Yeah.
So
It's weird. I'm trying to think the last time I had tea. And I feel like it was the last time I had iced tea when I decided I maybe you know what? No, maybe that's a lie. I feel like I had some of those alcoholed Arnold
oh,
Palmers
sure.
that were like the half and half ones.
Hmm.
I don't know if that counts. I mean, I guess
I'm sure there's some tea in
maybe
there.
somewhere, where it's like at the bottom, it's like 2% lemonade, 2% iced tea. The rest is just chemicals. But it's been so long. I should probably try it. I don't. I get set in my ways. I think that's my problem.
Yeah.
Is like a lot of times if I want caffeine, which I typically do, I drink a Zevia, which is kind of like the healthier soda. It's expensive, but I'll just drink one or two of those, and that's my caffeine. I've tried coffee, I just can't do it.
Yeah.
I work in an office. I've worked in the same office for 10 and a half years. I cannot bring myself to enjoy coffee. I've tried.
See, I think cold brew tea would be a good method for you to try. So just like cold brew coffee is super popular, you can cold brew tea too. And it takes longer, but the cool thing about it is you really don't have to do much. So basically you would just fill up a pitcher with water, add your tea, like generally double the amount of tea you're making, and then just put it in the fridge for like 6 to 8 hours. So, like, I'll put it in the fridge when I go to bed or when I'm leaving for work. By the time you wake up or you come home, you have a whole pitcher of delicious iced tea, just made for you. And when you're brewing tea that way, it comes out smoother and sweeter because there's no hot water involved in the process. So, especially if you need a convenience factor, cold brew is definitely a good way to go, I think.
Interesting. Yeah, I never really thought about that. What's if you're doing that, like, is there specific teas that you would use for cold brew, or does it really
Yeah,
matter?
I mean, you can cold brew just about any tea. Generally, I wouldn't recommend anything that has like flavors added to it, because tea is fine to just like sit in water for a couple of hours, but flavored teas might have like oils or different things added to it. So that can get a little funky if you're letting it sit for a while. But really, any unflavored tea does really, really well.
And what does something like that taste like? Do you need to put like sweetener in it, or is it just taste good out of
Yeah,
the
I mean,
pitcher?
I find I really enjoy it right out of the fridge. It kind of just depends on your flavor palette. For a lot of people, when they first start drinking tea, they're really used to adding sugar to everything. I know I was when I first started drinking tea. I had like all these agaves and honeys and syrups and things. But over time, the more you drink tea, your taste will evolve and change. And I find most people will need sweeteners like less and less and less, as they get more into tea.
Interesting. You know what? You might have sold me. I might need to give it a go. Now you brought up matcha, and I had a note in here because I know it's preparation's a little bit different, right? What common like misconceptions do you see about matcha preparation? And then how do you help people get it right?
Yeah,
It's fickle, right?
definitely. It can be. So I think the most important thing to know about matcha is it doesn't dissolve. So I'll see people, make videos on TikTok or whatever where they're like stirring it with a spoon or a fork or like a small kitchen whisk. And the basically matcha, when you're preparing it, it's a suspension rather than dissolving. So you really have to froth it really well into water or milk, whatever you're putting your matcha in, to be able to suspend the tea in it, so that you're not getting clumps. You're not getting, especially if it's clumpy, it's going to be more bitter tasting because you're getting just these clops of dry tea in your mouth, which isn't pleasant. So it definitely helps to either get like a little hand frother, like you would use for like frothing milk. Just the little battery operated ones are fine. Traditionally, it would be whisked with like a bamboo whisk, which is what's used in Japan for making matcha. That's my favorite method, but if you're just getting started, it's not necessarily like a have to. When
Yeah.
you can honestly just throw it into a cocktail shaker, you can throw it into like a blender bottle. There's lots of different ways that you can do it. So I think it's just kind of finding what works best for you, but definitely keeping in mind that it's never going to dissolve into what you're putting it in. So you have to make sure to like really mix it thoroughly.
What does matcha taste like compared to just like a regular tea?
Yeah, so
Because I've never had
I
it.
would say matcha is just more intense. First of all, the t- it's more intense, but it has a slightly different taste than, like, say, a standard Japanese green tea might, since matcha comes from Japan. The tea leaves are shaded before they harvest them, which blocks out the sunlight, and it makes the tea plant kind of work harder to grow, which actually results in more tender leaves that are sweeter tasting. So part of that process is what makes the taste of matcha. Um, Matcha is kind of known for having a taste called umami, which like is not necessarily a taste even like most I think Western people would know necessarily or understand. But you watch Food Network,
You
so I
watch the
think you.
Food Network,
Yep, exactly.
you hear
My
it
fairy will
all the
teach you
time.
about umami. But it's basically like a savory sweetness. So it's a very unique and interesting taste in that way. But they grind those tea leaves into a fine powder. And so you're basically eating the whole tea leaf instead of just steeping it like you would with a regular leaf tea. And so it is just like quite intense. When you first start it, most people when they first try it are like, I don't know if I like that. That was a lot. But it definitely, there's quite a lot of people who really do enjoy it. And even if you don't like matcha just by itself with water, there's lots of ways that you can use it. So definitely, like in the book, I put it in cookies. You can put it into smoothies, all kinds of stuff. Lattes are also really good.
Interesting. So, obviously, the online tea community has evolved quite a bit since you started, right? Where do you see that heading? Do you see it like the tea culture to continue to grow?
Yeah.
Because I do see more. I think like, and this is just someone that I don't follow anything tea related, and I do see things I think more now than I have ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Tea, like year over year, I started my website almost 17 years ago. So I've just been kind of just watching that gradual growth over time. Year over year, tea's consistently grown in consumption. I think a lot of people are looking for things that are healthier. They're looking, especially like a lot of people now are a little bit more concerned about like where what they're drinking comes from, where like say my grandparents' generation, they would just buy a box of tea. They didn't know where it was from, who made it, if it was made ethically or anything like that. So I think
Yeah.
part of the interest in tea is fueled by that also, that people are just becoming more curious of like yes, this is black tea, but did it come from India? Did it come from China? Did it come from Sri Lanka? Because each of those places will give you a different tea experience. And so I think that's definitely part of it. Social media definitely is a factor too. In particular, we were just talking about matcha. Matcha has become so popular on TikTok that there's a worldwide shortage of matcha.
Really?
Yes. And so, yeah, it's definitely interesting, especially for someone who's been into tea for so long to see these like rapid changes that are happening now.
Well, you're like, damn it! I want some matcha now. I can't get it.
Yeah, yeah, it's like
It's a blessing and a curse, right?
exactly. Like the tea companies in Japan are having to limit how many, like you can only buy one tin per person now because there's just not enough to supply the demand.
Wow. So what's your take on, the current trends, right? We talked about boba. You have sparkling teas, cheese tea. I know that, I've seen random stuff like that. Are there anything new in the tea world that you're excited about?
Yeah, I definitely think we're seeing a lot more just incorporation of tea into like culinary world, cocktail world. There's a lot of crossover. Tea being incorporated into different like ready to drink beverages that you can buy. So I definitely think it's super interesting to just see. I live in a small town in New Jersey. There's not really. I would say it's a tea desert here. I'm the only person to tea here. But
Hey, good opportunity to open up a tea shop.
yep.
That's all I'm saying.
But a town or two over, I can go and get like a tea cocktail at a fancy restaurant, which wasn't possible 15 years ago when I first started. So I definitely think we're definitely seeing more just incorporation and just more awareness of tea in general, which I love to see.
Do you have like I don't, and you can tell me if you've gone there or not, but do you have any aspirations to check out, Japan for their like go to Japan for teas or
Yeah,
I don't know about India because it's a little different there, but do you have any aspirations? I'd love to go to Japan.
yeah. I mean, I want to go anywhere there's tea. Actually, this fall I'll be traveling to Japan. Yeah, so
Nice.
it's definitely excited for that. I've been taking classes with the Global Japanese Tea Association, where their goal is really to like spread Japanese tea, all over the world and help people learn more about it. And so this. I'm going to be taking a class while I'm there. That's kind of like the pinnacle of their program. But I'll be able to go on the tea fields and pick tea and do all the things. So I'm really excited for that.
That's got to be like a dream
Oh,
trip
yeah.
for you.
My husband keeps joking
It,
I might not come home.
I was just gonna ask. Are you going by yourself, or are you bringing the family with you?
Just by myself. Yeah. But
Oh, that's
yeah.
awesome, man. That's awesome. You could sleep in,
Yeah.
no one's gonna wake you up. I don't know. I don't know how your family is, but I'm not a morning person, hence why I've probably migrated from a lot of stuff with the way I drink. So, for me, I grew up, and so I guess let's see. I didn't drink caffeine at all, really, unless it was in soda. And then I went on a weight loss journey, lost a ton of weight. People didn't know who I was from middle school to high school. Like it was like a 2 month period. I lost like 70 pounds. And I think it was when I was like 16 or 17, I got a job at GameStop. It was my like third or fourth job. But I guess my manager at the time, he was drinking energy drinks and I was tired. He's like, oh yeah, here, try one. It's like, giving a kid fucking drugs, and that started a 20 plus year. Every morning I had to have one energy
Oh,
drink.
yeah.
And at some points I was drinking two or three. Were you ever an energy
Not
drinker?
really. Luckily, I think just my tea obsession came like right at the time when most people would get into energy drinks. So I think that missed me in a way. But caffeine definitely, if you overdo it, caffeine can be like that. Technically, caffeine is a drug, and just like any other, the more you consume it, the more your brain needs in order to feel the effects of it. And so that's basically your receptors in your brain will need more and more caffeine if you overload it all the time like that. So that's definitely a thing that people have, experienced. One of the big advantages of tea for me compared to other types of caffeine is tea also contains an amino acid called L-theanine, which is which actually relaxes your central nervous system. So it almost kind of balances out that caffeine, because a lot of people when they drink coffee or energy drinks you get that rush but then there's like a crash when it wears off.
Yeah.
And so with tea it's a much more sustained wakefulness, they call it, because that L-theanine is just gradually releasing that caffeine into your system instead of dumping it all at once.
Ah, that's interesting. I had no idea. I got to tell you that. So like I told you earlier, I'm one of those people. I cold turkey stuff. So when you're drinking energy drinks for 20 years and then you cold turkey it,
Oh yeah.
I actually was fine. Like I didn't get like any crazy headaches. I think for a day or two I just took an Advil, just in case. Like I wasn't even really getting anything. But I've talked about this before, and I'm like an advocate, a heavy advocate of telling people to avoid energy drinks now. I actually like I didn't go blind, but literally I was driving home from work and I couldn't see street sign. I couldn't read street signs or the driver's license plate in front of me,
Wow, that's scary.
and it freaked me out. Like one of my top 5 things, I don't want to go blind. I don't want to lose my mind. I don't want to go blind. And so, I call the wifey. I'm like, I'm going blind. Like I'm freaking out. She's like, you're not going blind. Go to the doctor. And when I go to the doctor, they can't find anything wrong. I'm physically as healthy as you can be. So they didn't understand what happened because my vision went down 4 clicks in each eye, and with contacts. You know what I'm saying? So like that's why it's freaking me out. And they asked if I didn't made any dietary changes, and I was like, yeah, stop drinking energy drinks. And they're like, that's what it is, dude. Your eyes have been doing this for so long, and now that you're not doing that, they're like, and go back to normal. I mean, I was drinking sometimes 500-600 milligrams of caffeine a day.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, and your body just eventually you get used to it, and like I could drink an energy drink and then go right to sleep, which is not good. And I know people that can do that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Is there teas that you can drink that do help you with sleep?
So it kind of varies by person. I think that's important to keep in mind is each person's caffeine tolerance is going to be different. And some people are affected by certain teas more than others. Generally, caffeine has never really had that big of an effect on me. So I can drink most teas. I would say definitely if you are super sensitive, it would be better to do something herbal, like chamomile and lavender are definitely ones that people often find do help them with sleeping.
I think that's the one I was thinking of, which is a poser tea. It's not a real tea.
Well, we call them like a tisane or an herbal infusion in the tea world. So they're still valid. They're just not tea.
I got to learn the lingo. Yeah. All right, you're gonna. All right, I'll check back with you in like 6 months, and I'm gonna be like, yeah, I got these infusers. I'll impress.
Yeah.
I promise.
Yeah, definitely. Let me know. One I do like that does have some caffeine, but it's very, very low. Is a Japanese green tea called hojicha. So it's actually made only from the stems of the tea plant, which caffeine is normally more concentrated in the buds of the tea plant. So that can kind of generally give you an idea of what might be higher in caffeine by knowing what part of the tea plant it comes from. But then those stems are roasted. So it gives it like a really rich, nutty, almost coffee-like taste. But it's very low in caffeine because it's made from stems and it's roasted. So that's definitely one of my go-tos, I would say, if it's very late.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So you get the tea flavor, but you don't get the infusion of caffeine. So if you had to, this is a fun one. So if you had to host a tea party using your book, what's your dream pairing of like a tea and the treats you'd serve? Or if you've done it, you can let me know.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I haven't done like a full-on tea party with like all the recipes. I'll usually just make like 1 or 2 things to share if I'm doing something. But definitely, I think, the one recipe I probably make the most often is matcha lemon sugar cookies. That like, even if you don't like matcha, they're just delicious.
Yeah, I do love me a sugar cookie. Yeah. I'm not going to lie.
And they're like chewy and they have the lemon that goes like citrus goes really well with green tea. So that's definitely one I really, really enjoy and love sharing with people. But I don't know, as far as a pairing, I think, I would maybe just, make a lot of different things. I find I like giving people choice when we're pairing that way, just because not everybody likes the same tea or, taste is super subjective. And so I think, variety is the spice of life. And it definitely helps a lot if you're introducing people, especially to tea, to just have like lots of different choices for them to be able to kind of figure out what works best for them.
All right. So this is obviously this Drink O'Clock podcast, right? And you had some alcohol recipes. Do you think that, I know you mentioned earlier, was the sangria your favorite recipe that was alcoholic? And maybe you can give us a quick view on how you'd go about making a nice alcoholic tea beverage.
Yeah, so definitely the tea sangrias I really like. Really all you need to do is brew your tea double strength. Like for iced tea, you want to make sure that you have the full flavor for when you add ice. I'll mix that basically a half and half portion with, you can do white wine or red wine. Just the tea that you use might vary depending on what looking to do. The white one's probably my favorite. So I'll brew like a white tea and mix that with white wine. And then you can get creative. Normally you would add like triple sec or, something like that you would normally put in a traditional sangria. But then you can get really creative with like fruits that you can add. I like to do for 4th of July, I'll do like a red, white, and blue one. So I'll add like,
That's cool.
make my fruit kind of match the theme there. And it's just really incredibly easy. You don't have to put too much thought into it. Another really fun way is to just, we were talking about cold brew before, you can cold brew tea in liquor, strain it, and
Oh,
then your liquor gets on the flavor of the tea. And so that's a really, really fun way to incorporate it. I know you mentioned that you're a fan of old fashions. So one of the ones in the book, I use Lapsang Souchong, which is kind of a smoky black tea. And so it almost kind of makes it more like if you used a scotch, but even smokier. And so that's a really fun drink I think you'd like.
ooh, okay. I like it. Yeah, you know what? It's funny. I've seen a couple different recipes for old fashions, and I'll tell you this. I went. We love going to Vegas. It's like our favorite place to go because we love gambling. But we went to this sushi place, and they had it was a chocolate old fashioned,
Interesting.
um, and they had like a leaf, like a little branch, and they lit it on fire. So you had like that smokiness into it, and it was probably one of the best old fashions. And I wasn't gonna get it, but I'm one of those people. I'd like to try one, and especially if you go to a fancy place, right? You want to
Definitely.
drink a fancy drink, haha. So my goal was to get one wherever we went, and I was just gonna do a standard one, but I'm like, the guy told me, he's like, this is like our number one selling drink, and I'm like, all right, and it was amazing, and I wasn't gonna try it. So it's one of those things. I know we talked a lot about certain things, right? We talked about the matcha, boba, things like that. I think the point is you just gotta, one, you talked a lot about, getting in tune with your palate, right? Because something I like, you may hate, and then vice versa. So it's gonna take some trial and error for that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many different things that determine what you can taste. There's, certain aroma compounds in tea that genetically some people just can't smell or taste because their genes determined that they just wouldn't be able to. Kind of like some people say that if you eat asparagus, it makes your pee smell, but not everybody
Yeah.
can smell that smell. And it's that's a big part of it, but also just your background, where you grew up, what foods you ate. When I was a kid, a lot of what I ate was very bland. So it took a lot of time to kind of develop a palate because I really wasn't a super adventurous eater when I was younger. I didn't try lots of different things. So I didn't almost, over time, you kind of develop like a mental Rolodex of flavors. And so it really, when I got into tea, I almost had to like consciously work on developing that. That's when I tell a lot of people, like when they say they get into tea, they're like, oh, I don't know how to describe what I'm tasting. But I'm like, go to the grocery store, like smell the bell peppers, smell the parsley and dill and all the different things there are. Because those are things that when you drink a tea, it might remind you of something that you've encountered before. And that's kind of like your first step to being able to describe what you're tasting.
Interesting. So, we'll end with this one. In terms of figuring out your flavor palette, that can get kind of expensive if you're, trying. Like, do you suggest a way of trying? Like, is there a place you can go to get like small sample things to try? Is there like an online service or website?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely recommend everybody to see if they have a local tea shop. A lot of the times they'll have somebody, like they'll be happy to brew a sample for you, or, they might be able to sell you just like a small portion so that you can. It's definitely, I think, important to try smaller portions of things where if you buy this big bag of tea, like I'll see people, I know you brought up Tivana. I used to work there. People would buy a pound of tea and not realize how big a pound of tea is. And then they
Yeah.
would possibly be stuck with this giant container of something they don't even really like that much. Where
That would
definitely,
annoy me.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You just have like
absolutely.
a cabinet, in the back that just holds all the tea. Is there like an expiration? Do those
Yeah,
expire at some
so
point?
tea it doesn't necessarily go bad per se, but it will start to lose its flavor over time. So for most teas, the best shelf life is going to be about a year. That can vary a bit depending on the tea and how it's stored, but generally anything longer than that, it's not going to taste as good. And so it definitely always pays to buy smaller quantities, and you can always just buy more later if you finish it instead of getting a giant container and then have it go bad and sit in the back of your cabinet for years, which happens for a lot of people.
I'd say it would definitely happen for me for sure. Because
Definitely.
once I get into something, I get into it pretty heavy. Well, look, it was a pleasure having you on. Let's do this. Tell me if you got anything going on, with your website, your blog, anything new coming up, and then also tell everybody where your website and your blog and all that is, so you can plug yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so you can find me at teaformeplease.com. I try to publish every week when I can, just lots of different informative articles about tea as well as product reviews. So it is a good way to help find teas that you might be interested in. At this point, I've written over 2,000 articles. So there's a lot
Okay.
to dig into there, even if you're just, encountering me now. But definitely I'll be sharing a lot of my journey to Japan later this year. So that'll be exciting to share on the website for everyone. But you can also find me on most social media platforms at Tea For Me Please. And so, except for TikTok, I'm the real Tea For Me Please because someone put my name there.
Oh, how dare they?
No worries.
How dare they? They did that for me too,
Yeah.
And this awesome. Well, look, this is the Drink O'Clock podcast. You can find my podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's Drink O'Clock Pod on all socials, and we'll have this up soon. Thank you so much for hanging out.
Yeah.
I appreciate
Thanks
it.
for having me.
Have a good night.
On a stormy night where legends unfold, there's a podcast that's breaking the mold. Raise your voices, raise your glass high. Welcome to the Drink O'Clock podcast. Let's dive. Oh, grab an old fashioned and join the fray. Raise your spirits, let the music play. From the corner pub to the dance hall floor. Drink O'Clock podcast, we're ready for more. We're ready for more. With a mix of folklore and rebel cheer, we'll guide you through tales of whiskey and beer. From Irish shores to lands afar, grab your friends, it's time to raise the